Hello, I'm Nancy. Welcome to my channel. The videos on my meditation playlist are about spiritual truths that Christians need to know in order to live by them. I want to help you to live your best life ever, the life that God intended for you to live. But it's up to each of us to learn spiritual truths and then to live by them. The first scripture we will be talking about today is Romans 15:4. Paul says in his letter to the believers at the Church of Rome, "For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through endurance and the encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope." For believers, we look into the history of the Old Testament and hopefully learn from the mistakes of other people. We can learn from the many, many mistakes of the children of Israel that going another way from the way that God has provided will always lead us to places that we do not want to be. We can read about the many stories and try to imagine the time in which they occurred in order to learn by them. We can see God's compassion upon them, even as they chose the way of judgment. If we can see the results of going our own way or going the popular way of the present day culture, then hopefully we can choose God's way of doing things over those ways. One thing I will call to your attention is the promise that God made to Abraham in Genesis 12. You can read that for yourself. But my point is that God made his promise, and even though Abraham made mistakes after the promise was made, God fulfilled his part. He fulfilled his promise, his word. Did it take a while? Yes. Did Abraham delay the promise? Yes, he did. Did God renege on his promise due to Abraham's disobedience? No, he did not. God honored his word despite Abraham's actions. We see throughout the Old Testament the faithfulness of God and how he keeps his word. But we should also look to the examples of his disobedient people and not follow after those. They would cry out to him in their distress, and once God relieved their distress, they would return to their evil ways. Now, do you understand what evil means? Evil is anything outside of God and his way of doing and being. If we will keep our eyes on God, trust him to do what he said he would do, what he promised to us, what he provided for us, then we can have faith, we can have confidence in him, and trust him to be our God while we are here on this earth. What God states is his word. And to God, his word is of great value. It's a sad state of affairs when you cannot believe what people say to you. Their word is of no consequence and cannot be trusted. I tell the inmates that I minister to, if your word is worthless, what else do you have? Many of the programs inside prisons and jails require the signing of a contract which lays out the rules and regulations of the particular program. Whenever I'm involved in the processing of these contracts, I talk to the men and women first about what they're agreeing to. And I end with this question: do you hold up for your word? If so, sign. If you don't waste our time and your slot in the program. And if they sign and later violate the contract, I boldly ask them, so you don't hold up for your word. Your word cannot be trusted. I love them. I love the men and women that I minister to in prisons and jails. But I do not allow them to continue in old ways, familiar behaviors that are detrimental to their futures. It's called tough love. While we look into the Old Testament for history and examples of the men and women of Jehovah God, we do not look to the Old Testament for the way believers are to operate under the new covenant. The new covenant that Jesus established through his death, burial, and resurrection. If we want to know how believers are to live, to operate today, we look to the letters that were written to the believers in those New Testament churches. We look to those words and we find our way of doing and being for today. We also sometimes make the mistake of not valuing the words that God has spoken about us in these letters, and we limit him in our lives. If we look back in the Old Testament, we see the faithfulness of God time and time again. And if we pay attention, we can see that time in God's eyes is not the same as time as we think about it. We can gain hope and encouragement that if God stayed faithful to Israel, he will stay faithful to us. But we look into the New Testament to see what he has to say about us today. Romans 8:16 tells me that I'm his child. Colossians 1:14 tells me that I'm forgiven. Ephesians 2:8 tells me that I'm saved through faith in him. 1 Corinthians 6:11 tells me that I'm set apart. Romans 5:1 tells me that I'm just as if I had never sinned. 2 Corinthians 5:17 tells me that I am a new creation. 2 Peter 1:4 tells me that I am a partaker of his divine nature. Galatians 3:13 tells me that I am redeemed from the curse of the law. Colossians 1:13 tells me that I am delivered from Satan. Ephesians 6:10 tells me that I am strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Philippians 4:14 tells me that I can do all things through Jesus who strengthens me. 1 Peter 2:24 tells me that I am healed by the stripes of Jesus. Romans 12:1 and 2 tells me that I am transformed when I renew my mind to think like God thinks. 2 Corinthians 5:21 tells me that I am in right standing with him, with God, not because of my behavior, but because of my position with him. I don't want to overwhelm you with scriptures, but I do want you to see that the New Testament scriptures are ours for the taking, and we take these scriptures by speaking them to ourselves. Nothing about the Christian life just falls upon us. We have to lay hold of the truths in the New Testament and apply them to our lives in order to have the life that God planned for us, for each and every one of us. This week, meditate upon the words of God and let them get down into your spirit in order to change your life. Begin to live out of your spirit and enjoy the intimacy with God that you experience being connected to him by the words that he has spoken. If you're enjoying my videos, please do me a favor, like and subscribe, and check out each of my playlists when you have a chance. Thank you for watching today, and we'll be together again soon.